All right, so the first question is from Callan. The question is, so I know among the 3D printing hobbyists for things like D&D and Warhammer, the vast majority say to utilize a resin-based printer over filament-based printers. Is it likely that one of these types of printers will become the more standard type among printing, or will they both be relevant in the future? So the price of resin printers is coming down a lot. And they're getting bigger bases and easier to use, things like that. And so honestly, if I had to pick a winner, the winner would probably be resin-based printers. That said, I mean, there is still a big turnoff to deal with like all the chemicals and the cleanup and things along those lines. And not to mention that just FDM printers are so inexpensive that it's usually economical to have both of those, right? Both a resin and an FDM printer. In fact, that's like people I know that do print minis use both, right? They use the FDM for more of the terrain features and things along that nature. So honestly, the real answer is they'll probably both stay relevant, but resin printers are getting used more and more these days. Emma asked, will 3D printing be used in the future within the food industry? For example, cake decorating or producing lab-grown meat? Yeah, so one of my favorite projects to do with food is this engineer, her name is Ellie, and she has a company that is making this product called, I think it's the Cocoa Press or something along those lines. And so what it is it's a chocolate 3D printer. So it's a printer that prints things out of chocolate. And so it works really well, and it makes really cool novelty chocolates. But those are like one-off things, right? So like a wedding present or things of that nature. I don't really see them going into industry as like a production thing, like lab-grown meat. I imagine that would be some sort of like extrusion process where it's continually extruding it like toothpaste or something like that. Yeah. So yes, I certainly see it in more like one-off things, like, ooh, look at this, a cheese sculpture that looks like the meme or something along those lines, right? That's a little bit more feasible, but once again, those are like one-off things. All right, so Zerilda asked, 3D bioprinting is an advanced manufacturing process that integrates living cells with biomaterials, enabling precise and controlled layer-by-layer bioink deposition. By employing specialized 3D bioprinters, researchers and scientists can fabricate intricate tissue structures, mimicking the natural complexity of living tissues found in organs and body parts. How will the rise of bioprinting and tissue engineering using 3D printing impact healthcare, such as an organ transplant? Well, I think the biggest thing is, that's going to reduce cost because, well, it's going to reduce cost for a lot of reasons, right? Because if we can actually produce an organ from scratch, that would be great. And I know that we're about at that point-ish. I'm not super up on my bio-related stuff. But the real fact is that additive manufacturing is so inexpensive, and making a really precise machine that can do additive manufacturing is so achievable that some of the tools that we can make to use that would be so inexpensive that we could have them at every hospital, right? Or, every region. So it can be distributed manufacturing, which is a really, really strong thing, right? So 3D printing aside, right, the future that I really hope for is distributed manufacturing of insulin, right? So you go to Walgreens and they have an insulin machine right there that produces it, right? Because then that's kind of giving power to the people type of thing. Yeah, so unfortunately I'm not up to date on some of the science on bioprinting. But like I said, the machines, inexpensive, everyone can have them. What's going to be more expensive is the gels that's being used. Thankfully, the resolution or the tolerance that you have to have for things like organs would actually be pretty low compared to some of the things that we can already do, which is another big boon there. All right, so Morgan asked, how do you think developments in AI will impact 3D printing in the near future as well as long term? Well, I I think the biggest thing that we're going to see AI for is print failure detection and prevention. So there's actually one of the students who was a PhD student at the same time as mine. He was working on machine vision that would watch your print as it happened, and it knew what your print should look like, and it knew what the problem was. Like it was like, oop, the extruder must be clogged, or you're under temper, or you have too much temperature, or something along those lines. And so it would find that and start to correct for it. And that was the idea, at least. I'm not entirely sure where they are on this project, but it's a thing that they're working on still. So that's one of the biggest things I see. The other thing why I think OpenSCAD is still super valuable is, right, with ChatGPT being able to pump out code and module and things along those lines, that the idea of just saying, hey, print me out an adapter for blah, 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 it needs to be this long and this big, and have ChatGPT generate an OpenSCAD model and put that out, that future is getting pretty close. So those are the two things I see that are closest with AI and 3D printing is machine vision, correcting things automatically, and then large language models generating models for you to print. All right. So Nick asked, will metal 3D printing become more accessible / cheaper in the future? I'd one day hope we might see mainstream desktop metal printers that could print stuff from screws to hinges or even frames for an RC car or something in our homes. Yeah, so the type of stuff that I did for my degree, my PhD, probably wouldn't be useful for that, right? What I was doing was much more bulk depositions. I mean, I was trying to decrease resolution, but still nothing along the lines of like screws or things like that. So really what we're gonna have to have happen is SLS to become cheaper, right? Selective laser sintering, I think, is the best technology for what you're asking for. And right, lasers are getting cheaper and you can get laser cutters and things along those lines. So I'm not gonna be surprised if SLS starts becoming more more affordable for the consumer. But definitely not welding-based solutions. We'll just never be able to get to that resolution. Actually, one of the things that I tried was using a jewelry welder, which is for like little teeny welds. But that was like a spot welder, and it was a big pain in the butt. So do I think it'll happen eventually? Yes. I think it'll be SLS. When that happens, I don't know. Shelby asked, do you think that 3D printed houses will ever be more than a novelty? I've seen a company in Texas that is making them, but they cost at least $400,000, which I think is due to the newness of it. Yeah, I've kind of always thought it was a bit of a gimmick. I shouldn't say it's a gimmick because they were able to implement things. There's like I can't remember if it was in Holland or where, a country over in that area that was like 3D printing bridges and things along that line. So I don't think it's a gimmick. I think it can be implemented. It's really expensive because it's new. And so I'm curious to see where they go with it. But honestly, I think that there's better directions that could go, right? Like automated bricklaying machines, right? There's all different directions that we could go to automate things that are going to be quicker and more efficient, right? If you're just laying down bricks compared to whole depositions, that's going to make, well, it's going to be way faster. So that's what I'm always kind of looking for, is something to like lay down bricks for like a more modular system, whereas extrusion is just kind of a slower thing. Yeah. So I guess my answer is, your question is it ever going to be more than a novelty? Probably eventually, but I think it's going to take a long time for it to be more than just a novelty. But automation in building, I totally see that rising up. Dillinger asked, it seems as though we are finding a way to use 3D printing with a great variety of materials. what do you think will be the next big step in non-plastic 3D printing? Yeah, so what I think, and I guess also what I hope will happen, is we get really good conductive depositions. Like we're talking like almost pure copper depositions, which it had, the big thing there is resistivity. But once we could get really low resistivity materials, like almost like pure copper, once we can get to that point, then we can have embedded circuit boards in our 3D prints with a multi-material printer. We could have actuators that are printed as a single piece, sensors, all sorts of stuff like that. You'll be able to go from printing a bunch of plastic parts to plastic parts with conductors inside of them, and so you can get things like coils, traces, antennas, all sorts of stuff like that, which would be huge for 3D printing, absolutely massive. So that's what I'm thinking the next big step is, that's gonna really explode things. Let's change over here. All right. So Ethan asks, 3D prints have started to pop up as a more portable and artistic way to use 3D printing technology. In a similar vein, a handheld router is kind of like a portable version of a CNC router, just without all the electronics to move the cutter. A company by the name of Shaper has created a product called the Shaper Origin that uses cameras, fiducial tape, and a display to turn a handheld router sort of into a CNC router, except all the motion and accuracy is provided by you, the operator. So my question is, do you think with technology will come to 3D printing? Do you think that technology will come to 3D printing? So first, I have a Shaper Origin. Excellent. I really love it. Do I see it coming to 3D printing? Well, it would have to be a little different because the router is all planar, right? It's all in one 2D plane, and you go up and down from there. And so the moment you pick it up, the fiducials become warped, or the things that the cameras are looking at become warped and skewed, and its localization is all thrown off. So all I could really see that is for like a single layer of deposition, like if you want to emboss a piece of plastic to have it raised up. So like if I want to make like the Michigan Tech Husky on a piece of like sheet plastic, that would be something I could do. But I don't quite see it for like large 3D models. But yes, Shaper Origin, really great. Yeah, it would be hard to get real 3D models that way, just because I think the accuracy that you'd be able to get once you add that third dimension in there compared to your fiducial models would really start throwing things off. Bradley asked, how might 3D printing impact the medical field in the coming years? And what breakthrough could it lead to in terms of personalized healthcare solutions? So two things I think is, I do have a friend who lost his leg in a motorcycle accident. He was actually my best man at my wedding. Super cool, Alex. Well, it's not cool that he lost his leg, but he's a super cool person. Anyways, and so his prosthetist has a 3D printer that he uses a lot for mock-ups and things of that nature. And so that's like an excellent case of, you've always got different looking nubs and things along that line. So being able to like quickly prototype and test fit things, really, really useful, especially because it's distributed, right? They have the 3D printer right there and they can have it next day. The other thing is, dentists have been using more and more 3D printers and resin printers and post-processing and things along those lines. So yes, it all just goes back to having things more distributed, right? So with additive manufacturing technologies, it's much more achievable to have these things right on site, and so that's reducing lead time and things of that nature. So, and I'm always about that. I love distributed stuff. Corey asked, what are any potential barriers preventing 3D printing from being widely used in a large scale in the aerospace industry, such as the construction of jets? Yeah, so we have seen it being used for thrusters, right, for like rockets, and that's basically like a big MIG machine that's welding out in a big eccentric pattern. Honestly, I think the problem is that additive parts are never going to be stronger than something that's either injection molded for plastic or milled for metal, right? Or stamped or things along those lines. Additive manufacture is always going to be weakest, and so it's always just going to have a hard time comparing to those solutions. And there's so much money in aerospace industry that ooh, check it out. A nice, perfect, right? Oh, I can't show you. Perfect, ready to eat thimbleberry. Anyways, so yeah, I don't think, at least as the technology stands right now, I don't think that the parts that you can get with additive manufacturing will be good enough for the aerospace industry. All right. Linda asked, are there any places that you think industrial 3D printing will head in regards to printing technology? So, now, hold up. Let me parse this question again. So, are there any places that you think industrial 3D printing will head in regards to printing technology? Well, okay, so thinking of industry and 3D printing, I probably could have a cooler background if I held this out further, couldn't I? Yeah, so I would probably say where I see additive manufacturing getting used more is this idea of an additive subtractive hybrid. So, you know, if you're a company that extrudes something, but you need like a little nub on the end of it, right? Formerly, they might weld a piece on there or something along those lines, right? So you got like the sheet that we're like pushing out, and you want like a nub right where my nose is at, right? If you're making it out of metal, you might have to like mill a bunch of material, which they wouldn't do, that'd be wasteful, they'd weld it. But now I think we're gonna start looking at this idea of additive manufacturing on top of sheet or extrusion goods. That's the thing that I'm really thinking is going to happen more and more, is you'll buy a kit or something along those lines, like from IKEA, and you'll see like a piece of metal, like a metal rod, and it will have something that was added on top of it. That's where I'm thinking we might go in terms of like being able to get like weird shapes and things like that added to extrusion. The airplane's about to take off. Anyways, wonder if it's gonna take off behind me or not. Sorry, I should focus. So Jake asked, will there be a day where 3D